This is the MyStar Learning Series for February. And the topic today is the cross-cutting concepts, which is probably not something that we've done a lot of in the past. We haven't looked at the CCCs in great detail. But Tony and Steph are with us here today, and they have been working with some teachers on digging into the CCCs, and they ran a class this summer, joint class with Michigan Tech and Northern for some teachers about the CCCs. And so then we asked them to come today and share with us some of the things that they shared with the teachers in their class over the summer. So again, we'll keep linking the slides in the chat if you're just coming in, and welcome. And sign yourself in on slide 2. And then I'm going to put you in some breakout rooms so that you can meet the people. We'll do probably 3 breakout rooms, looks like, and say hi to the people that are in your breakout room, because we'll ask you to work with them again at least one more time. So introduce yourself. And then have a little discussion, a little turn and talk, a little, elbow partner kind of stuff about what are the CCCs and how do you use them in your classroom, or maybe you haven't been able to quite yet because you're not, quite sure what to do with them. So, and then slide 4 and 5 and 6 are set up for you to have somebody in your group just record some of the thoughts as people are talking. What do we think the CCCs are? And what are some ways that you are maybe using them in your classroom? All right, everybody's back. Thanks. I know I didn't give you a ton of time, but we have lots to do today. So I did want you to just have a few minutes to say hello and then to start thinking. So lots of great thoughts here. CCCs are ways of thinking about science. I saw some people mention it's a lens. One of the groups said they're very abstract, which is true, which is probably why we haven't focused on them quite as much as the SCPs. And you can use them when you're doing whiteboarding. Some of them include cause and effect and systems, scale, proportion, and quantity. Scaling with the solar system, for sure, is a big focus. Can use them to make sense of data and reasoning, check for understanding. You can make connections. And it's a vocab that's used across multiple disciplines. Yeah. So once you have kids using those CCCs, they're going to use them in all kinds of situations. And can be used when foundational skills are underway. All right. Great. So thanks. Some good thinking going on there. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to spend just a little time looking at what are the CCCs and what do some of the experts say they are. And then how do we use them in science? And then we're going to present a framework for helping you advance your students' use of CCCs and a few tools for integrating CCCs more probably openly and clearly in your instruction. So we're going to hear today from Steph Tubman, who is our senior research scientist at MyStar, and Tony Mathis is with us also, and he is also a MyStar research scientist, and they are both MyStar curriculum team members. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Tony and Steph.
Okay, so as Chris mentioned, we're going to start off just looking a little bit about what the experts say are the CCCs, and I think this is important because the thinking around these cross-cutting concepts has changed over time. And as people have started working more and more with the cross-cutting concepts. So back in 2012, when they wrote the framework for K-12 science education, which is sort of the document which NGSS is built off of, CCCs were listed as concepts that bridge disciplinary boundaries, having explanatory value throughout much of science and engineering. And at least in my experience, that was one of those things that you read it in a book and say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to use this. And then you go to try to do it and the wheels fall off. It's really hard to do. And I think that's where it becomes really sort of abstract. And how do you do this? And what does it mean to be crossing boundaries? it was tricky. Um, and I think even the authors of the framework recognized that it was tricky and they didn't do the best job of explaining what cross-cutting concepts are or their vision for how they're used, because many of them came back together in 2021 and published this book through the NSTA Press, Cross-Cutting Concepts, Strengthening Science and Engineering. And in this book, they sort of reframe the cross-cutting concepts to talking about them as the CCCs are conceptual tools for examining unfamiliar situations, as well as each CCC is a lens for looking at a problem. Each lens highlights a particular perspective. And for me personally, like this was one of those breakthrough moments for me. Just like I love thinking about the CCCs as these conceptual tools that we use to make sense of problems and figure things out. And you need lots of tools in your toolkit. And if you don't, um, if the only tool you have is a hammer, all the world's a nail. So that's why it's really important that we introduce all these different CCCs to students and give them the tools they need to be sort of dynamic, creative problem solvers. So there's 7 cross-cutting concepts in the next gen science standards: patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, quantity, systems and system models, energy and matter. Or the authors of that CC book like rebrand this as flows, cycles, and conservation, which I also really love, because that to me is a tool. I can work with flows, cycles, and conservation, structure and function, and stability and change. And these are different tools. Are also different lenses that we can use to examine problems and phenomena, right? And different questions lend themselves to different CCCs, and as well as using a different CCC, it can give you different insights on similar phenomena. So, just like some questions really lend themselves to investigation with Hubble, whereas others are more compound light microscope. Same for CCCs. And so we're going to try this out a little bit in some breakout rooms. We're going to go into 3 breakout rooms. Each breakout room will have a different CCC, and we're all going to look at the same phenomena. So if technology will behave, let's see, let's try this again. So you'll have this video in your breakout room as well, but it's a steel ball rolling down a ramp onto a table, falls onto the floor and rolls away. Phenomena don't have to be phenomenal, right? As well, in each breakout room, there's going to be some sort of Kickstarter questions in there. Those are just to get your conversations going. Don't feel like you need to answer every one of those. Just sort of, they're just conversation starters to kind of get you rolling. And really, the purpose of this breakout room is we want you to share, what did you notice about this phenomena using your CCC as a lens? And all right. Welcome back. Thanks for giving it a try. I appreciate it. Might have gotten cut a little bit short, but we're trying hard to stay on time this afternoon. Wondering if anyone, the spokesperson from Group 1, would maybe be willing to talk a little bit about the things that you noticed using systems and system models.
Okay, I can do that. So you can see the key parts of the system. We put the ramp, the rolling object, gravity, friction, table, floor, and then we talked about input and output, like the ball on the ramp is the input, the output, the ball moves from the table onto the floor. We were starting to explore gravity causes, which is another CCC. We probably shouldn't have gone there, but gravity causes the ball to move. And then we thought the last question was, what if you changed the boundary and only included the boundary of the system at the end of the ramp versus the place where the ball comes to rest? And we said that you would lose the whole sense of potential energy from the ball falling off the table to the ground if you short or made the boundary of the system smaller.
Great. Thanks so much, Jen. Yeah, it's, you're in control of that boundary, and that's one of those important decisions that you need to make when you're trying to use the CCC, right? And there's some very real trade-offs. How about anyone from group or room two, flow cycles and conservation?
We focused a lot on potential and kinetic energy and the change from potential to kinetic energy. Also mentioned that gravity was where the ball gets its energy in the beginning as it goes down the ramp and how it's converted into the kinetic energy. And then we started getting into towards the end how the ball would be slowing down because of friction, forces, and different things like that.
All right. So great. Thank you so much. Kind of so how that energy was transformed at different points and how it was flowing between those different types of energy. Thanks so much for sharing. How about room three, stability and change?
We saw that the marbles and the changes, the marbles position is changing as it's rolling down the ramp. It's changing height, it's changing distance from where it started. Its energy and speed is changing. Things that are staying the same would be the ramp, the meter sticks that's made of the meter sticks, the table, the floor in the room, and the marble. If we're doing multiple trials, looks like it might stay the same. And then the other question, sorry, we didn't have time to type that in, about how we could find the rate of change in the position. We could measure distance over time, period. And then is the system in the scenario stable or unstable? It's unstable as there are changes in motion, and the marble is even moving out of the system if the table is that system.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And so I think one of the things that I'm noticing as everyone's sharing out is, these CCCs sort of acting like a lens, right? You're focusing on different parts of this phenomenon. And I think that's something that we as teachers and curriculum developers can really ought to be focused in on is, what lenses are we using? What lenses do we need to use to get the answers we want to our questions, right? And using these CCCs as powerful tools to make sense of phenomena. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steph to talk a little bit more about how we can help students develop some mastery with these CCCs.
Great. Thanks so much, Tony. Thanks everyone for being here today. I just wanted a quick audio check. Can you guys hear me well? Great. Okay. Lovely to hear that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a new tool that Tony and I are working on called the Framework for Student CCC Mastery. And this is the first time we've really presented about it outside of our class, and we're super excited to tell you about it. Before I started talking about it, I did want to let you know that this is not something that we've integrated into the curriculum. We're working on this right now as a pedagogical tool and something that we're probably going to continue pushing out through professional learning and to hopefully help folks customize the way that you're using the CCCs with your students. As I think you'll probably see, I think that'll work well because CCC mastery is going to be pretty individual to the class and the student. So wanted to let you know that that's how we're thinking about it, is as a pedagogical tool. Great. So before we get into the details of the CCC framework, I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. So it includes 5 stages of skill building with CCCs, and it helps students advance in the complexity of their performance with the CCCs. And it's also iterative and it's not linear. So like you're going to see, I'm going to tell you about the 5 stages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's not an expectation that students are going to move through those stages in that order without any repetition. We expect that there'll be lots of repetition at the different stages as students master different things. And that'll give a chance for you also as an educator to tailor it to your students and what they seem to be needing. I also want to talk a little bit about why it's important that we have a framework for advancing student complexity with CCCs. Obviously, the first thing is they're very abstract, but they're also an entire third of NGSS, right? And so we need more tools for how to integrate these in the classroom. And the CCCs themselves have a lot of value. So both of these quotes speak to that. And so in the framework, it's an expectation that students will be able to actively engage not only in the SEPs, but also by applying the cross-cutting concepts to deepen understanding. And then the book that Tony was talking about really eloquently lays out the case for why CCCs are so important. And they use a word that's really helpful. They say that CCCs should become part of a toolkit that students are able to freely call upon and use when confronted with any unfamiliar science phenomenon or engineering problem. So that's a pretty high bar. We want to make sure that we have the tools for you as an educator to help you get to that point with your students where they have that toolkit that they freely call upon, that they can use for any phenomenon. That's a multi-year, across your entire life almost project, right? So we need a lot of tools to help us do that. Another thing that Tony and I think is really important in terms of having this framework is that a lot of times we're using the CCCs every day in our lives, right? Like think about, systems thinking. If you've ever had a lamp that went dead on you, like for example, it's not turning on anymore, you probably used actually systems thinking to figure that out. You probably checked, is it the plug? Is it the light bulb? Is it the lamp itself? But if we don't have that vocabulary, we're not able to use that as explicitly as a tool. We may not see as many opportunities. So this quote speaks to that, and I'll just read it real quick because I think it has a really interesting, cool analogy. The importance of making CCCs explicit is similar to the research on logical fallacies, where we see that people are better able to recognize a logical flaw if they have learned a name for it. So students are more likely to recognize opportunities to use the CCC. For example, correlation does not necessarily imply causation if they have learned explicitly that that's a concept. And so that's our idea of like the concept, then vocabulary. And likewise, if we don't have the concept, then we can't really use the vocabulary, right? So this is making sure that we've given students that opportunity to have both, that's really important. And I know I can say for myself as a scientist that that's definitely the case as well. Another point that's really important is that CCCs are another opportunity for us to build equity in the classroom, and that's for the reason that CCCs are not just tools that scientists use. They're also tools that we use as human beings, as like everyday scientists, right, to figure out the world around us. And so they can be thought of as resources that students bring to school and resources that can be leveraged in the classroom in order to help all students engage in the learning. And that's the cool thing about them being 1/3 of the standards, right, is that all students can engage in the CCCs because they are fundamentally, student or human tools, I should say, that we bring with us. So something cool that this quote points out is that CCCs offer points of entry to science and allow students to see themselves as scientists. So I think that's a very cool point to keep in mind. All right, with all of that in mind, I'm going to walk us through the 5 parts of the framework for CCC mastery. So there'll be like a student performance that comes up and then an example of what that might look like in the classroom. So the first stage is students are unconsciously or implicitly using the cross-cutting concept. For most of us teaching NGSS, that's probably happening all the time. And even in non-NGSS curricula, that can happen too. So an example, if we were looking at a predator-prey, maybe lynx and snowshare, a student might say, we notice in the graph that the more lynx there are, the fewer the snowshoe hare. And then they might notice the opposite, the fewer snowshoe hare there are, the fewer the lynx. So the numbers go up and down. So students are talking about a pattern that they're noticing, but they're just not using the word pattern to describe it, right? In the second stage, students explicitly name the cross-cutting concept to make sense of the phenomenon. So in the same example, they might say, there is a pattern in terms of how the number of lynx and the number of snowshoe hare affect one another. The numbers go up and down opposite one another. You can see where it starts to get a little wordy. We'll talk about tools to help with that. But basically, at this point, the students are naming the CCC. All right, in the third phase, we're taking it even a little bit higher. Students are now going to describe how the cross-cutting concepts were used to make sense of a specific phenomenon, how they were useful to them. So for example, a student might say, identifying the pattern between the numbers of lynx and snowshoe hare helped us to predict future population sizes, for example, if that's what they did. And then we're kind of going to shift it from a reflection backward in stage 3 to in stage 4, a reflection forward. So students will be able to identify how the cross-cutting concept could be used. For example, if the teacher prompted them, let's say we're looking at the lynx and snowshoe again, and the teacher says, how could, or maybe we've looked at lynx and snowshoe, we're looking at another predator-prey graph. The teacher could say, how could patterns be helpful to us? And the students would be able to say, looking for a pattern between predator and prey will help us to make predictions about how their populations will change. So they're building on these previous 2 stages where they've been using the CCC, building up into more and more explicit levels of use and more independent levels of use. And then in the final stage, that's where we do want to build students to be very independent and being able to identify when a cross-cutting concept will actually be useful. So rather than the teacher prompting with how could patterns help us with this, the teacher could present the phenomenon or problem, and the students will actually identify which of those 7 CCC could be helpful. And so a student might say something, and this is obviously not in exactly student language, but you get the idea. A student would say something like, looking for a pattern between X and Y can help us to understand the relationship between them. So we're building all the way to get students to that more independent use where they're the ones really even deciding which CCCs we're using. And this is a slide that just when we go in, we're about to go into a breakout where you guys will get to examine this and work with it. This is just a slide for your reference with all 5 stages in one place, because the task that we're going to have you do will require that you be looking at these together. So all right, for our breakout, we want to throw you guys into a room together by grade level. You'll be able to choose which room you're going to go into. We want to give you an opportunity to, before I talk too much about the framework, to directly explore it and talk about it together as educators. So the task, you'll review an example of the framework in a MyStar unit. Tony and I came up with these examples of how they could be applied in different MyStar units. On the first slide, this is what the slide will look like. There's going to be 5 different student performances. I will give you a cheat code that they do develop from simple to more complex from the top to bottom, just so you know, there is that coherence there. And then to the right, some of the stages will be filled in, but then there will also be blue boxes that are highlighted for your group to fill in. So each grade level will have 2 boxes to fill in. Read the student performance, go back to the slide, 2 slides before, and figure out which stage of the framework you think students would be at. And then if you guys get done and you want to check your work, I won't click on it right now, but there is a link to sort of an answer key with what Tony and I think the answers are. And then the last part, we want you to just do a little bit of reflection, and because we really want your feedback on this too. The 3 questions for your reflection are, what do you notice about the repetition of stages? To which stage would you take your students if you taught these lessons? And you can justify your answer if you like. And how could you use this framework as a tool for differentiation with your students? You do. But everyone did great. We actually agreed with all your answers. If you wanted to see, I won't click on it now just for time, but if you wanted to see a little bit of our reasoning of why we agreed with you, we highlighted some keywords and phrases in the answer slides, if you're still kind of mulling that over. And then I did just want to invite each group, if you had anything from your reflections that you wanted to share, just give you a minute to do that. It's not mandatory, but I guess Jen, I'll throw it to you because I know you and Robin were the only 2 in that group. Were there any reflections to share?
We had a discussion about the difference between level 3 and level 4, and Robin had a really good point, because I said I can see the one is something already happened and then or projecting into something that could happen. And Robin made a really good point that 6th grade students can't always think abstractly. And so that's why level 4 is more complex than level 3 for some students. So that was a really good, that helped clarify things for me. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jen. I was having a great conversation with the eighth grade, and one simple way we thought of to clarify it is like it's basically the tense of when it occurred. So, like, stage 1 and 2 are in the present. I started trying to put that on the slide, but ran out of time. Stage 1 and 2 are in the present. Stage 3 is looking backward to what happened in the past, and stage 4 and 5 is predicting in the future. And that's why stage 4 and 5 are going to be more abstract and more difficult for many younger students who are still kind of developing that conceptual ability to abstract. So yeah, great point, Jen. All right, great. I'll throw it if seventh grade, anything that you wanted to share, and it doesn't have to be just a reflection, any questions or anything that came up for you. Can't see everyone, just trying to see if anyone's okay. And you don't have to share if you don't want to either. Let's see. All right, just checking that everyone's good.
Yeah, I think
Great.
we had a
Oh,
deep
Tim,
conversation. Sorry about that. Our
you're fine.
conversation, we were looking at, how do we fold this into the different levels within just that grade level, if you have an honors class or if you have students with IEPs. And it would be nice to have the school set aside a level, maybe level 1 is sixth grade, level 2 is sixth grade, 7, maybe they're doing level 3 and 4. Maybe eighth grade is going to focus on level or ninth level 5. And to realize that the content. I know we had a discussion about how we often focus on content. We got to get through this unit, got to get to this unit. We're never going to get through all these units. But again, you had brought it up earlier that this is just 1/3 when we look at the what the students need to learn. With the cross-cutting concepts being a third, and the SCPs, and then the content. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's a great idea to tier it into levels and for if there's that coordination within the school or the district to coordinate how it's scaffolded over the years. That would make this like very effective. And I think we're thinking, yeah, that ultimately would be needed to implement it kind of in its highest form. Because you can do a lot within one grade level, but students really are going to learn the most if this were to be scaffolded over grade levels, which is how NGSS intends it anyway. So, but we also recognize it's another thing on the plate. It's another thing in the teacher bucket, right? So we want to also acknowledge that. But yeah, thanks for sharing. Those are great insights. All right, and last but not least, eighth grade. Anyone have anything to share? Anything that stuck out to you or? Okay. Seems like we're good on that. Well, thanks you guys so much for digging into this. We're excited to keep working on it. We're going to tell you a little bit about our next steps with it at the end. And our final section, which I'll pass to Tony, is just to dig into some tools for advancing student use of CCCs. So,
Steph, real quick, you mentioned
yeah.
that MyStar has already incorporated this. Is it somewhat tiered in the grade levels?
Yeah, right. So we had not incorporated this, the framework fully itself. We basically have students up to the explicit and sometimes dabbling, but we've not, what I meant to say is we've actually not explicitly, intentionally incorporated the entire framework. Right now, we're not going to go back and add it everywhere into the curriculum, but we want to provide some supports, teacher support, so that if this is something that helps you, that you can add it in. And the way the tools work, and Tony will show, it is very flexible to add it onto a lesson, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of teacher flexibility there. Yeah, great question. All right, if I could stop sharing, my mouse is going crazy. There we go. All right, I'm going to pass it to Tony. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you, Steph. And, thanks, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit now about some tools that we found and have found helpful to helping your students develop some of this mastery. The first one is probably the one that we use most often. It's the STEM Teaching Tools number 41. There's a link there on the slide if you want to pull it up. I probably have about 500 copies of this PDF saved on my hard drive in various places from all the different times I've opened it up. But it's a bunch of really helpful sentence starters or maybe question starters that you can use and adapt to your classroom to target the CCCs that you want. My personal take on it is I think it was written maybe a little bit before this shift towards CCCs as a lens happened. So some of those frames might take a little bit more adaptation than others, but it's a really helpful starting point. And then there are lots of other tools out there too. There's these graphic organizers from South Carolina. They have all sorts of organizers for, you know, all the CCCs, all different grade bands. And they can be helpful for reinforcing some of the kind of important vocab and making things a little bit more explicit. So here, you know, showing how mechanism is the link between cause and effect. There's some tools there that if you want to use to reinforce some of those ideas, they could be really helpful. And then kind of last but not least, if you're looking for, you know, your next beach read, this NSTA book is really great. Maybe the best part about it is that the very best chapter is the one they give away for free. So that if you click on the link, it'll take you to where you can buy the book from NSTA, and it'll also have a download a sample chapter button. And it's like a 7-page preface. It's really short, and it really, really powerfully lays out this vision of CCCs as a tool or a lens. And it really helped change the way that I think about CCCs and really made a lot of things click for me. So if you have a little bit of time, I highly recommend that sample chapter. So now we have a little bit of time left in our session here. Let's try out using the STEM teaching tool 41 a little bit and trying to move students up this and pairing that with this framework for student mastery. So we're going to look at a phenomena from either life science or space and earth science. That'll be sort of your choice where you want to go. And then in that breakout room, identify a CCC that you would want to use to explain that phenomenon, and then create a prompt using that. We'll say let's use a stage 2, so kind of shooting for that explicit use of a CCC to investigate the phenomena. And when you're in your breakout rooms, you're going to have the phenomena there that you can play. So for example, this would be a physical science one, just a red hot nickel ball. One of everyone's kind of favorite phenomena, and they get it red hot, drop it in some water, and you can watch what happens. And when I see this phenomenon, one of the first things that occurs to me is I start thinking about scale, proportion, and quantity. And in that CCC book, one of the things that I found really helpful is that CCC isn't just about how big something is, but it's about how sometimes it's really useful to change your scale, right? Like to explain what's going on in this phenomena, you really got to start thinking about what's going on in the molecular scale. So that's where I'm drawn to, is trying to help students recognize that changing scale is going to be really important for investigating that. And so that's why I adapted a question using this link to something like, what scale of model would best help you gain insight into the red hot nickel ball and water interaction, and why? So, you know, zooming out isn't going to be super helpful. You're going to want to zoom in, right? So for the breakout rooms, we have 2 different phenomena, one life science, one space and earth. The life science is grass growing. So a time lapse of grass growing. We have some grass seeds, and you'll see over time, they turn into grass, right? We're literally watching grass grow. And so in that room, think about the CCC you'd want to use, and take a shot at creating a prompt. And it's not necessarily that everyone in the room needs to agree, or you need to reach to consensus on the one best prompt, if there is such a thing, but just start talking about what CCCs you would use and what a prompt might look like. And then same thing for earth and space science. Here is a model of the solar system. And we're seeing both the sort of circular orbits, and because the sun is also moving through the Milky Way, another way to represent that motion is actually as helical motion.
All right, everybody's back, Tony.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for, giving that up, giving CCC prompt writing a try. It looks like, everyone came up with some really interesting prompts. Now I'm going to turn it over to Steph to just talk a little bit about what we're thinking for next steps in terms of these CCCs.
Great, thanks, Tony. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about this with you guys. So as you probably noticed in today's session, we're not presenting some big coherent package of every tool you need and guidance per unit and everything that would be needed to implement the framework, or even to implement CCCs as a tool like we're talking about. So we want to actually start to work on that more. We'd like to develop some more scaffolds and teacher supports to help teachers to take students to different levels of the framework and different grade levels. As you may have noticed in the tool session, there aren't a lot of tools out there to take students to a level 5. You might be reading, an NSTA article, and they talk about taking students to a stage 5 and having them identify which CCC, but there aren't a lot of tools aggregated in one place to do that. And so our next step is we would like to work on that and start to pull together some scaffolds and tools for you, teacher supports for you to do that. I also want to talk a little bit about the reason why we don't have that currently is that in the beginning of when we all started working on NGSS curriculum, the CCCs we thought was just like, oh, well, just have the student use it in a sentence and you're okay. And that was basically like the NGSS curriculum developer consensus. You see that in a lot of curricula that are out there. And this framework was really born of doing a lot of reading and learning. And it's like anything in NGSS, right? Over time, as we've tried it with students, we all have learned a ton of stuff. And so we realized wait, having students just use the word, it's actually limiting their potential with these CCCs. It's actually limiting what they could achieve with the CCCs. And so that's why we really created the framework. And so really our next step is just putting in the supports to actually help you get there, the pedagogical supports. Because like I said, right now we're not planning on actually editing the curriculum, but we'd like to look at maybe having some general tools, toolkits, and also some unit specific tools and toolkits. It'll probably be a long process, but we would love to involve you. We'd like to do some small scale implementation and testing before we go off and do the whole big thing. And we would also really love your feedback. So our email addresses are there. admathy@mtu is Tony, and then I am sctubman@mtu.edu. So we get really excited about this stuff, and if you do too, we would love for you to reach out to us. And if you'd be interested in testing some stuff that we put together, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out, let us know what you think, and we really appreciate you being here today. So appreciate you. That's all from us.
All right, I'm going to wrap us up. Just real briefly, we do have some upcoming MyStar PL sessions, virtual sessions. One more in February. It's our phase 2 Build Your Toolkit for Claim Evidence Reasoning. We have a couple things coming up in March. Another learning series. We're going to focus on place-based learning and how that connects with MyStar. And hopefully we're going to have a couple of teachers share some MyStar teachers share what they've been doing. And then we have our last piece of our assessment series, which is about some ways you can do some direct instruction with your kids and help them to teach them to take 3D assessments, which should apply nicely also to MSTEP, which is going to be coming up shortly after that. And then our phase 2 3D assessment, which is a deeper dive, build your toolkit for a 3D assessment. For anyone, but especially teachers who are just starting to be implementing MyStar. And then, what's our last thing? And then we have a couple of MyStar Superstar master teachers who are also modeling instruction experts. And so they are going to spend some time with us in April. Again, making that connection between the things we offer in MyStar and the things that modeling instruction offers, and how we can kind of blend those into some really great instruction. So those are coming up. We are also going to be at MSTA. We have 6 different sessions. So that's the next slide, Tony. Thanks. We have 6 different sessions that we're offering. And then we also have an opportunity to get some grant funding to attend MSTA, or, maybe to get some funding for other materials or anything that you're looking for. So Michigan Space Grant has some money available. So if you are not signed up yet for MST and you're looking for cash, there's that opportunity. And then we always invite you to continue to connect with us via our Facebook community group. We are always happy to hear feedback about the learning series. We actually do look at that feedback. So the last slide there has a link for feedback if you would like to share that with us. Lindsay always takes the recording of the learning series and has it edited, and then sends you a really nice agenda with the slides and any other resources and the video. And so you'll look for that in the next week or so. And I will send you the sketch information that you need if you want to claim sketches for this learning series. I'll get that out to you tomorrow morning. I hope that we see you all again sometime soon. Keep in touch. And again, we appreciate you being here and thank you for your time.